webinar. So the name Piyush Rahate, as you all know, and I bring in about 15 years of experience in the industry, working as a developer and then moving into the role of Scrum Master, then slowly getting into the role of Agile coach and working with teams currently, helping them to get onto their Agile journey. That's pretty much what I do on a day-to-day basis. That's basically myself. On professional front. On personal front, married, one lovely wife and a young daughter, 1.5 years old. She was sleeping about 15 minutes before when I was starting and setting up this meeting. I'm not sure if she has woken up by now. If she is woken up, then you might be hearing a background noise. So please excuse me for that. That's what I would request all of you to bear with me for another 45 minutes or so if you are getting all that background noise from my side. All right. Sounds good?
Yes, Piyush, all good.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So making the most of retrospectives is what we are going to discuss today. And we are trying to understand what it is all about. So if I have to ask you all, right, what does it mean to retrospect? Anyone?
I think look back, right?
Yeah. Okay.
The current sprint.
Okay. And what else?
What did we do well? What has not gone as per the expectation? How we can improve?
Mm-hmm. All right. And if I just say if I say instead of thinking from the perspective of your team or just Scrum itself, if you just have to think from the perspective of the English meaning of the word, then how would you describe retrospective?
Reflect.
Reflect back. Okay.
Adapt.
What else?
Adapt.
Improve.
Sorry, Ashok did not get that.
Inspect and adapt.
Okay, looking back. And
Improving, Piyush.
improving, yes, absolutely. And any other thoughts?
Recollection, maybe.
Reconnection. All right. And when you are doing all of this, right, when you are reflecting back, when you are trying to look back of whatever has happened, typically making a review of your past events or actions or a period of time, right? How is it going to help?
Now, most of the time when you look back at things, you wonder, you do a post analysis of what you did, right? And you wonder, okay, you could have done it in a different way. You understand what are all the mistakes that we did, and it helps you.
Yeah, okay. So if I have to if I'm understanding what you just said, you are saying that when you look back, you can figure out a better way of doing things or doing things in a different way. Is that what you're saying, Krishna?
Right, agreed.
Okay, so typically you identify how can I improve, right, for the next time.
Right.
All right. What else?
So work becomes very much routine. So you just take some time to look back and appreciate each other as well as feel good about the new things that we learn.
Nice. Appreciation is also a good aspect, right? Look back and see who has helped you and how you can help them and appreciate them. Great point, Rupa. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so a little bit went out as well. We are working in silos now at desk. No grapevine, no gossips. So I think we can vent out at each other, right? Little bit in a constructive way. Yeah. So that will also help.
All right. So maybe coming from a coaching background, maybe I will say I would not use the word went out, but maybe I would say we are giving each other feedback so that we are helping each other to become better, right?
Yeah.
Right? Providing some kind of feedback. All right. So typically when we look back or when we are retrospecting, we are typically thinking from the perspective, okay, this is what has all happened for past few days, or these are the events that we have all gone through, or these are the actions that we have taken. And now having all these things in place, right? How can we become better, right? We are trying to figure out what has worked for us in the past, and we are trying to figure out, okay, what we lagged and how are we going to improve on those aspects. That's typically what we do when we are typically retrospecting, correct? Everyone at the same page for at this point in time with me, at least?
Yep.
Yes, Piyush.
So it's more like constructive thinking approach which we follow.
Nice. Thank you for that word, constructive thinking. I'll put it down here, right? So it might help me to go back to my teams and say, hey, you are doing retrospective for bringing constructive thinking to your teams. Thank you for that great word.
Yeah, we also want to bring out facts of what we did in the past, right? A week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Yeah.
Right. So fact-based analysis is what we are trying to do here. Yeah. Great. Now, when we put all of these stuff in, say, Scrum context, and we try to understand sprint retrospective, what comes to your mind? Have you seen this situation anytime in your teams?
Quite often, Piyush.
Yep. Yes.
Right. This happens quite often, right? Maybe I think almost every other sprint, this is what you would be seeing, right? Teams are so busy into their day-to-day work and getting their deliverables in place that they often do not have time to see how they can take a pause and improve themselves, right? Improve themselves from the perspective of either the process, or improve themselves from the perspective of the tools, and maybe even at times, right, when we are working as a team, we are working with people, and people are emotional beings. So emotional beings do have their own emotions showing up at the wrong time at the wrong place, right? So you might get into team conflicts and all. So how are our relationships going on within our team, right? Are there people who are struggling to take the control of this situation, or are people all amicable here, right? All of those things do come into perspective when you're working as a team. So what happens? Your sprint retrospective gives you that moment where you can take a pause and look back at how your entire sprint went by with respect to people, process, tools, and even relationships, right? How are we dealing with the human factor, right? And that's what typically we do in our sprint retrospective when it comes to Scrum's context, right? Are there any specific ways that you are aware of how you would run your retrospective? Any typical techniques that you have tried so far?
We use different jargon. Sometimes what went well, what is to be improved. Sometimes good, bad, ugly.
Okay,
Just
nice.
make them interesting.
So typically you have tried out what went well, right? What did not go well, right?
Good, bad, ugly.
Okay, what else?
So there is also sailboat technique, Vikash here. Yes.
Yeah,
Sailboat technique.
nice. Sailboat. Sailboat is a very popular technique and a great technique to use, actually. Great for generating a lot of insights. Thanks, Vikas, for that. What else?
There's a 4L as well, which is very common and which is very popular, Piyush. Like, learned, lagged, and longed for.
Yeah.
That's also something I've used. Apart from that, sailboat is another that somebody else pointed out. I've also done some free-form retrospective formats wherein we just used a whiteboard and try to do voting for different things using a mural or a Miro, and that also has worked well.
Okay, tools also help like Mural and Miro, right? Nice, and especially in today's environment when things are completely remote, right? Each and every team member is now working from home, and we are sitting remote. Tools definitely help a lot. So yeah, they are quite helpful. Like lag, long for.
I've also used wheel of this wheel of names once. It's a very fun way of doing a retrospective, completely off the track, I would say. And once in a while, it's a good thing to do.
Absolutely. So all of these techniques are good, right? These definitely help you to come up with a lot of ideas. They help you to come up with identifying, okay, how can we improve? But then one of the biggest challenges that I have often seen is there are a lot of improvements that come out of our retrospectives. And to typically share an example from my experience, I was observing a retrospective for a team a couple of years back, and the Scrum Master was doing a great job. He came up with a great way of identifying what are the current challenges and then trying to help the team facilitate the retrospective to come up with some great actionable improvements, right? And what typically happened is the entire team by the end of retrospective, they came up with 25 actionable improvements. Okay. The challenge was we did not know how many or which of these actionable improvements we should be working on. So does this happen to you all as well, that you come up with a number of improvements, but then we do not know how these improvements will be implemented, or maybe how do we know that are these improvements really adding any value? Does that happen to any one of you? Experience that?
Yes, and once I did have this problem, Piyush, and what we ended up doing was having a separate meeting to just discuss those improvements and prioritize them and see which one made sense and voted for them and all of that. And that did help, obviously. But yes, it did take a lot of time to go through that list. I had about 12, and it took a lot of time.
True. So what should we do in this case? How are we going to handle this situation? Because this, from my experience, I don't see that it is a rare situation where people might come up with too many actionable improvements, but then there is no follow-up. How do we handle this? Actually, is there a way to really make our retrospectives so efficient that every time when we get into our retrospectives, they really make people engage, they bring engagement to people, and then we can really focus on, oh yes, the improvements that we have identified are going to add value.
So maybe a better way could be to order them in such a way so that which item is adding the more value, and then maybe putting them back into the backlog or product backlog and keep on taking one by one.
Nice, Ankur. Great point. Putting all of them in the backlog and then trying to figure out which makes more sense. Absolutely awesome idea. Any other thoughts? Anyone want to share?
Normally what we do, we created two pages where the primary and secondary we divided. In the primary is the most prioritized action item we mentioned, and the secondary, we can take it in the next step or something like that. So in this case, it will be prioritized.
Okay, nice, great idea to prioritize as well, Rashri. Thank you for that. All right. How many of you have read the book called Agile Retrospectives by Esther Derby? Anyone?
I don't remember maybe, but yeah, I've read it. I read a book on retrospective maybe 3 to 4 years back, where we follow a standard framework, right? While all these tools are good, we kind of follow a process of, you set the stage first, right? What you want to do, right? Show the facts, right? Gather data, then out of the data, you have to identify what's the outcome, right? Well, analysis, data analysis, right? You identify what can you do, and then you kind of close, right? So this is a circular loop which you have to follow while using all the good things which is written over here. Yeah.
Correct. Correct.
I read this somewhere, not sure which book it is.
So just to set the context background here, retrospective when it comes to Scrum is a very important event. Okay, and why it is important? Because the purpose of retrospection is to inspect and adapt, right? Like any other event in Scrum, we are talking about inspection and adaptation. What are we trying to inspect? We are trying to inspect our previous sprint with respect to people, process, tools, relationships, and everything that falls in their context. And we are trying to adapt how we can make use of our learnings from previous sprint to make our upcoming sprint more engaging, right? More fun, so that we are all focused and working towards value delivery. Now, typically what happens is when we get into a sprint retrospective, and no disrespect to any of the Scrum Masters or anyone else, what I have often seen in my experience is people do not really understand this core purpose of this event, right? They go inside this event with only one thought process, and that is, hey,
मुझे नहीं पता प्लीज
we have
मुझे नहीं पता बेटा होता तो डाउट देता ना.
Can you please mute yourself if you're not speaking? Sorry for that. Right. So what I was saying is, when typically we get into a sprint retrospective, we only go into this event thinking that, okay, this is another event set by Scrum and we have to follow it. So what we do, we go and say, okay, let us do this. We have 3 columns: what went well, what did not go well, and are there any things that we can improve upon, right? Okay, teams, talk about what went well. And the teams will start writing something or talking about some aspects and putting sticky notes, and one column is done. Okay, what did not go well? And this is what the Scrum Master is typically doing, right? Okay, what did not go well? So again, team is trying to capture some data, trying to put it there, and they fill in another column. Okay, and is there anything that we can improve? Are there any challenges that you see here? Oh yes, we see some challenges. Oh yes, we can see some improvements. Okay, and your third column is also filled, right? So you go into the retrospective, you come up with a lot of stickies, but then it often lacks a follow-up. It often lacks an accountability. Okay, the challenges that we have seen or the actionable improvements that we have identified, how are we going to get them addressed? How are we going to take them forward in our upcoming sprints, right? That follow-up is what I have seen and experienced missing a lot of times. What I'm going to discuss today is giving you that structure. And this is not my structure. This is not the structure that I have created. As I was saying, Sprint Retrospectives is a great book from Esther Derby. As a Scrum Master, as an Agile coach, no matter in what capacity you are working in, keep that book handy, right? And it will help you to make the most of your retrospectives. All right. What does this book gives us? This book helps us to understand a very basic structure of how to run your retrospectives. And the structure is very, very, very simple. A 5-step structure that, that gives you some context, okay, how to run your retrospectives. The step 1, okay, what is step 1? Quite simple. Step is set the context. Okay, what is it meaning? It means that as a Scrum Master or as an Agile coach who is trying to solve this challenges for the team, or who is facilitating this event, then you need to go ahead and set the context of what we are going to do in this retrospective, right? This is what typically we are doing in setting the context. Okay. typically what I do is I start my retrospectives with prime directives. Have you come across the term called prime directive for retrospective?
Is it
Anyone?
like, you know,
Yes, no?
this is Vikash. So is it similar to like, you know, asking a team to like provide one-liner that what happened in last sprint or something like this?
No, we'll get to that stage because prime directive is more about creating the safe environment for your teams. Okay, helping them understand that whatever we are going to be doing here is regardless of whatever happened in the past. Our focus is not on the past, our focus is on future, and we are trying to figure out how to do those things better in our upcoming sprints, right? You can simply go and search for Norman Kurth and search for prime directive, and this is what you would see. Okay, so what I typically do is I typically start with Kurt's prime directive by establishing for the team members this understanding that regardless of what we discover, right, we must understand and truly believe that everyone did the best job he or she could given what was known at the time, his or her skills and abilities, the resources available, and the situation at hand. Okay, I typically start by setting this context. Okay, this helps team members to understand that, okay, whatever has happened is in the past. Now we cannot go ahead and change that, but then we can learn from whatever has happened, and then we can, as we move forward, we can identify how can we improve those aspects, right? So I typically start with Kurt's prime directive for the retrospective. This kind of helps me to create a safe environment in that 3 hours of our time box for our retrospective. All right. Once that is done, I typically also talk about, and again, part of setting the context, I typically talk about what are the other things that we might be discussing. So as a Scrum Master, if I have observed that there is an important challenge that needs to be discussed, then maybe I will bring that challenge up and ask teams, okay, this is my observation as a team. Do you think this makes sense to be discussed in our retrospective? And then leave it to the team to make a choice. Or I typically ask, okay, is there something on your mind which you think that we should be discussing here in this retrospective, which needs to be addressed in our upcoming sprint? So I try to help them understand, okay, what could be our challenges and how we can ensure that those challenges are addressed in our upcoming sprints. So setting a bit of context. Another aspect I also focus here is trying to help them and guide them on what kind of technique we might be using during the retrospective, right? Are we going to use the same old, what went well, what did not go well, and improvement strategy, or are we going to use something else? Maybe sailboat, as someone mentioned earlier, right? So are we going to use that? And if that is the new technique that we are going to use, then I will set the context of how this technique can be useful and how we are going to make use of this particular technique, right? So that's what I do typically when it comes to setting the context of your entire retrospective. Right. I'll take a pause. Are there any questions at this point in time about whatever we have talked about so far?
One question. I'm kind of new to Agile, so I'm sorry if this is kind of very new, but like, should you, like over the course of a sprint, should you keep taking notes? Should you keep sort of planning the retrospective, taking into account, okay, this is something we need to address in a retrospective, this is something we won't do it this time, or do you need to like heavily plan out exactly what you're going to do in that time box, or do you kind of just wing it?
I won't say you need to exactly plan out, but it always helps to know what we would like to discuss in your retrospective. What are the typical challenges that you would like to address? As a Scrum Master, it becomes easy for you to facilitate a discussion, right? My 2 cents here, remember that plans are useless, planning is important. Okay, no matter in which context you are operating, even if it is a small retrospective, a 3 hours time boxed event, if you have a plan, right, you can always go ahead and adjust it as per the situation. But if you don't know what you're going to do, what you're going to discuss, then it turns out to be another boring meeting for your team members who will just come up there, show up there, do something and go back without really coming up with something that is actionable. Does that help, Dhaval?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Any other questions at this point?
Piyush, Vikas here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe out of context, if you want to park it for later, but just want to share. So two challenges, so there are multiple teams for which, suppose you're working for a new organization who are just getting into transformation. So what happens that everyone wants to attend the retrospective, and what I mean by everyone is like maybe senior person within organization, and they have a defined set of like formats that you should come out with 10 to 12 action items, and also team also if they are senior managers, the team also don't want to, if like as is SM, we are considered as neutral facilitator, but as you rightly mentioned that we can only say that okay, these are the points I have observed, but if team thinks it is good to consider for this retrospective, then we can discuss. We are not, or we should not force any agenda or any topic. But if that being the case, and if there are senior members, development is not a problem. So these kind of things happens, and also the timings, right? So when we have multiple people, right, sometimes they just want, like, we already know what are the issues are, let's discuss and close it in half an hour. But I'm really happy to see that you mentioned 3 hours. So I think so minimum we should go with at least like 1 hour plus is what I have observed. But I just want to know from your point of view, what should be the duration for like 2 weeks or 3 weeks? Thank you.
So because from the perspective of Scrum, right, there is no minimum time that we have set for the event. We have only set up the maximum time, right? The time box is 3 hours or less. Doesn't matter which or what is the duration of your sprint length. Okay. So even if you're doing 1 week sprint, I would suggest, if it is required, and it is really required, you can go up to 3 hours for your retrospective. And if you're done early, nothing wrong in it, right? You can still call it a day. You can have your right actionable improvements, and then you can move forward. The challenge, what I have often seen, and in my experience, is often Scrum Masters, under the pressure from the organization or under the pressure from teams, they try to merge your sprint review and sprint retrospective, right? So they make one event out of these two, and then they, oh, we are a 2 week sprint, so let us do everything in 2 hours or 3 hours, right? Because we are not, because they think that okay, 8 hours or 4 hours of the time box is for a 1 month sprint as per the Scrum guide. And then they try to do the simple mathematics, right? So 4 weeks, so 8 hours. So 2 weeks, it should be 4 hours. Or our sprint review should be, instead of 4, should be of 2 hours, and so on and so forth, right? But then that doesn't help all the time. We need to understand the purpose of the event. Are we meeting that purpose? If you can meet that purpose of identifying improvements, right, within half an hour, perfectly fine. But if that's not happening, then definitely invest a lot more time in understanding the challenges of your team, in trying to figure out how we can move forward from those challenges and become better. Does that help, Vikas? All right. Thank you. Yeah. So let me talk about the next step. The next step is to gather the data, right? Now, how do you typically gather data? It's very simple. As Scrum Masters, you are a person who is ever observing, right? You are the God in the team, right? You're not present, but you're always felt there. That's how you should be, right? You need to understand what we used to, what I have learned from my coaches, saying that you need to read the temperature of room, right? So what we are typically doing here as Scrum Masters is that throughout the sprint, your trying to observe how the teams are doing from the perspective of people, process, tools, and even relationships, right? So you are keeping a note of it. You're trying to make certain observations. And then those observations you bring into your retrospective. That's one way of gathering data. Another aspect that you can ask or gather data for your team is simply ask team members to come up with. Okay, I just saw a comment here from Pavas. Are you not able to hear me? Is everyone able to hear me?
We are able to hear
Yes.
you, Piyush.
We are able to hear you. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So what I was saying is you can gather data from many different sources. One of the source is typically your team's Scrum board, right? You can use your burn down charts. You can use metrics that you might be measuring, such as your velocity trend or the number of defects, right? And all of these become your data sources, right? Bring all of these aspects to your retrospective, right? Just after you have set the context, you bring in all of this data and you share this data with your team and say, okay, folks, this is what I have observed. What are your thoughts about it? Do you have any other data points that you would like to bring in here? Okay, and keep it an open discussion. You might also want to use some kind of liberating structures to facilitate the event. What I have seen quite handy in such situations is to use the liberating structure called 1, 2, 4 all. Have you heard about it? Yes, no, maybe?
No.
We have heard, yes.
Yes, we have heard. Yeah.
Okay, so for the folks who have not heard about liberating structures, there is a great website for all the liberating structures that are available there. It's called liberatingstructures.com. Okay, and if you go to this website, you would see about 33 different microstructures that can become very handy to improve your facilitation skills. One such liberating structure is 1, 2, 4 all. What I typically do is when we are trying to gather data, or even in the next stage when we talk that I'll talk about in a moment, I ask team members to think about to themselves for 1 minute. Okay, that's 1, 2, 4 all. Think to yourself for a minute and identify whatever data points that you might have. Then form pairs within your team and give them 2 minutes to exchange their thoughts. Okay, and then form a group of 4 within your team and then ask them to exchange their thoughts, right? So for the first 1 minute, you give them 60 seconds. For the pair, you give them 2 minutes. Then for the quadrant, you give them 4 minutes. And then all of us as a team, we discuss, right? For another 5 or 7 minutes to figure out, okay, what are the different data that everyone has thought of? What are the common data points that have we gathered? And we create a list out of those data points, right? So that's a great technique to help your teams to gather data from various sources. That is what I have seen working for me at many times. All right, so you can try out that. All right, have you tried anything else to gather data in your context?
So what I typically do is we definitely show the burn down chart, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we also show certain data where we struggle to complete a story. Maybe we added some stories in between, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some events where we dropped a story, right? So we kind of keep a note of all of this, right? So we kind of should flash it out on the screen, right? And keep the floor open.
True. That's a great point, Pavas, right? More often than not, it happens that business comes up with some priorities and they try to put in things in between. And if this becomes a pattern, right, this is something that we need to definitely address in our retrospectives. How are we going to tackle such situations if they keep on happening every now and then, right? If it is happening, if it has become a routine for each sprint, then how are we going to handle it, right? So great point. Bringing up that through your burn down chart really helps. Thanks for that, Pavas. All right. So once we have gathered data, the next step that we need to do is typically to generate your insights. Okay, fine. We have all of this data in front of us. But now what? Okay. What are we going to do about it? Can we do something about it? Right? And this is where the typical techniques that you must have seen, such as sailboat, right, becomes very, very handy. I hope you all must have seen the image of sailboat somewhere. Yes, no, maybe. If not, I can show you how a sailboat looks. Okay. Please bear with my drawing skills. Those are not very great. But then typically what happens in a sailboat retrospective is you create a metaphor. You create a metaphor of a sailboat. Okay. And what you're trying to do here is you're saying that with this sailboat, you're trying to move towards a particular goal. Okay. And while you move towards your goal, there will be lot of winds which will be supportive and helpful to move your boat towards this goal. However, there would be certain anchors as well which will be holding you back, which will not allow you to move forward. And then typically there might be some hidden rocks, right, as well, which might become your risk, which might be some dependencies, right? So what we typically do here in this aspect, or how I do it in this section, is based on the data that we have gathered, we try to establish a common problem that we would like to address, and that becomes our goal. This is what we are trying to solve in this retrospective, or this is what we are trying to address in today's retrospective. That becomes our goal. Now, having that goal in place, what are our strengths, what are the things that we already have that become our wins and that will help us to move forward towards our goal. Okay. And then we start putting our stickies on the wins section. Then I ask, okay, now are there any hidden anchors, or are there any things that are going to drag us back, that are going to hold us down? Those become our anchors, and then we put our stickies around those anchors. And finally, we talk about any risk or dependencies that might be hidden somewhere else. Okay, we talk about that, and we get all of those insights generated using this simple technique called sailboat. If you want to learn more about it, and if you want to learn how to run it, facilitate it, just visit the website called funretrospectives.com. Fun retrospectives.com, and you will get a detailed explanation of what all different techniques you can use for running a retrospective besides the sailboat, right? This is a great way of generating insights for your retrospectives. I have used it a couple of times, and every time it has worked very, very well, right? I still remember one of the retrospectives where I was running this sailboat retrospective or sailboat technique, facilitating using it. And the Scrum Master said, I have been doing this mad, glad, sad for so many days or so many sprints, but we were never able to come up with so many insights anytime. And with just change in one simple technique, we were able to find out so many challenges and even risk that he was astonished, and even the team was surprised to see the results that this change of one single technique can bring to your retrospectives. So I would say go ahead, explore fun retrospectives, find out the ways which makes sense for you, right? That would definitely help. All right, generate your insights. Now we have got the insights, everything is in place. Now we know what's happening wrong, what's not going well for us. What should we do now? And that's where your step number 4 comes into picture. Step 4 is all about.
Piyush,
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. This is Prem here. So one quick question.
Sure.
So the step 3, the insights which we are going to generate is based on the data which was collected in step 2, or it can
Absolutely.
be free flow?
Absolutely. The data that we gathered in the step 2, that will become the foundation for generating our insights in step 3.
Can you just give one example on how it will be correlated? Just one simple example.
Sure. Let me figure out if I have a retrospective from my team on my system. Can I search it for a moment, folks? If it is okay, I can.
No problem. No problem. Yeah. Please.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Give me a moment. All right, so I'm not really able to find it, but I remember an example. Let me share that example. Okay. In one of the teams that I was working with, they were creating microservices. Okay. And what they identified, or the data that they had during our data gathering, is they figured out that the microservices that were hosted on AWS were taking too long to respond. Okay, so that was the data that they gathered. All right, and with this data in place, I asked the team, okay, now this is a challenge, this is our problem, we have to address this. Now if we have to improve this, right, so our goal was to improve the response for the microservices that are hosted on AWS servers. That was our goal. Okay, and based on this goal, what are the insights, or what are the insights that we can do about it, so that we can figure out how to make these microservices respond faster. Okay, so one of the anchors that I can remember at this point in time is when we were hosting it on AWS server, we were only testing it into our sandbox environments. And the sandbox environments were not really replicating how our actual production or our production system was. All right. And because we were not able to test our microservices into a production like environment, that was holding us back to figure out a better way of making our microservices a better responsive web service, right? So that is how I remember that we came up with our data and the insights. Does that help, Prem?
Yeah, well said. Yeah, well said. Yeah, thank you. It really helps. Yeah.
Okay, so that's how you go about it, right? So you gather the data, and based on that data, you try to establish a common challenge or a common plan, which becomes your goal while you're trying to generate your insights. And then you help your team to create insights. Again, you can facilitate by using this fun retrospectives ways, right? Either sailboat or something else. And while you are helping them, you can again bring in the liberating structures, like I said earlier, 1 to 4 all. Okay, think about all the anchors for 1 minute to yourself. Then pair up with another team member and exchange your anchors. Become a group of 4. Talk about all the anchors, and as a group, as a team, list down all your anchors, right? That is also a great way of actually making the most out of your sailboat retrospective. Before I move forward, are there any other questions here? Yes, no, maybe?
Again, one of the point is you did mention about the fund retrospectives.
Yeah.
One of the experience which I have is, I have been trying out various different templates from fund retrospective and other websites. But over time, it's all about people get to know that, it is at the core, it is all about what went well and what did not go well. So people are asking, like, why is it that we are doing this? We know that it is all about what went well and what did not. Of course, the words change, but at the heart of it, it is all the same, right? So we have been facing the challenge in terms of people to get the people to give more insights on things. Yeah.
Right. So here's my experience, right? And I don't know if it is right or wrong, but this is what I have felt always. When you do one thing for a longer period of time, right? And if you keep doing it again and again and again, it becomes a routine. It becomes a mundane thing for yourself as well as your teams, right? And more often than not, it does not add any value, not to you, not to your team members, not to even your business, right? But with a small change, with a very small change in how you run a retrospective, just by bringing in a different technique, right? Every new time, this keeps your teams on toes. Okay, what is there new to learn in this retrospective for me? If I am going to this retrospective, is it going to be the same old what went well, what did not go well, and improvements? Or is it going to be something different that I'm going to learn? And just because of that curiosity that you pike in your team members, you can get more insights and more ways of tackling the challenges that you might have, right? So that's my experience. That's what I have seen working for me, by mixing and matching your traditional ways of running a retrospective with some fun items with it. That has really worked for me, at least. Does that make sense, Prem?
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
Hey, Piyush.
Yeah.
Rajesh here.
Yeah, Rajesh.
Yeah, I think that is very well said. I second that. Changing the approach every now and then will kind of refresh the the approach, and also allow the team members to participate. I was thinking the step 2 and step 3. In most of our retros, we combine them together. They go hand in hand.
Absolutely, yes.
I mean, to say gather data, we could also do by sharing the retro board well in advance. We do that more often, but how do you think, is there a specific technique that we could use to gather the data, motivate the team to gather the data before we even start the retro?
There is nothing like that. You have to do this in a sequential order, right? This is just a structure that helps you to understand how to make your retrospective in a much fruitful way. So there is nothing that you have to do it in a sequence way. What you are doing is absolutely fine as far as it is working for your teams. When it comes to gathering data, what I have just talked about earlier as well is focusing on the existing metrics that you already have, or existing boards that you already have for your team, such as you might already be having a burn down chart in place, right? You might be having your sprint board already in place, right? Use those sources to bring in data for your retrospective. For example, you suddenly see that there is a spike in the number of defects in our previous sprint. Now, why did that happen? Okay, so that's a data point that you have, that the number of defects increased in previous sprint, and based on that data point, now you are going to generate insights. Okay, why did this happen? Was our definition of done not good enough? Do we need to work on our definition of done? Right? That is also one aspect that you typically address in your retrospectives. Does that make sense, Rajesh?
Yeah, sure. I understand that, and I was thinking it's more of encouraging a team to gather. I mean, to say I have the collected data from from my point of view, how the sprint went, and then with looking at the sprint board. But slowly I wanted to, let's say that if Scrum Master is not there, slowly that's what we wanted to achieve.
Yeah.
Team they self-organize themselves, and they manage these retros even by themselves. So I wanted to know, this gathering part is very difficult. I work with 2-3 teams. The gathering data part, I struggling from last 2 years, what kind of approach we could take to motivate the team to gather the data by themselves. Of course, I can say that, okay, this went wrong, I observed this, this has come through us, but these all shared by the Scrum Master. But ultimately, this owned by the team, right? We wanted to build more self-organized team. So my question is, how can we as a Scrum Masters engage or motivate the teams to gather the data as part of the sprint progress, so that this can be more efficient during retros?
Right. So I bring up this image again, Rajesh. I trust teams are doing the best that they can do. However, more often than not, they are so much focused into the work that they are doing that they are not looking from a bird's eye view, or they're not trying to, they don't really see the problem as a problem. They see it as their day-to-day work, right? So even if we ask them, okay, gather your data, try to put some points there, right? More often than not, they're going to forget about it. And if you are in my Scrum class, I would say if you don't have a Scrum Master, you're not doing Scrum. But then that's not the objective of this webinar. It's always good if you can really make your team so much self-managing that they don't really require this accountability as such, right? And everyone takes up the ownership of running a retrospective in a way which generates more and more improvements and makes the teams more engaging and fun to work for the next sprint. But yet, I would say you teach them how to gather data, right? One of the stances that a Scrum Master has to take all the time is to teach team. Now, how are you gathering data at this point in time? You are gathering the data typically by looking at the sprint board, or you're using the burndown chart or something else, right? Now, if you can just teach these techniques to your team members, maybe they would be also able to identify and capture some of their data for themselves. Does that help, Rajesh?
Piyush,
Thanks.
one thing I want to share, like that is what I have tried in my team, and that has helped me. So for Rajesh question, actually, what I have done, I shared the tool link to the team in advance, or kept it in some common place. So as and when they think, like I have kept it open, like as and when they find any point to be discussed during the retro, they put down that point. Because usually it happens when the team gets into work, they forget what all they wanted to discuss in the retro. So instead of doing it at the end or during the particular session, I kept it open for the team, and as and when they get any thoughts related to their story or something which they have observed in the team, they put down that thoughts, and at the end of retro, like in the start of retro, we collect all those points and discuss around that, and whatever they find it's like essential to work on, they decide and take it further. So that has helped me. So maybe if you are, because I'm also dealing with like I also have 3 teams with me, so it's tough to manage or collecting data only by ourselves, instead of that making it more self-organized team.
Super great, Toshi, thanks for sharing that. Maybe Rajesh, you can try that as well. That might help, right? I'm just doing a quick time check. It's already 7:55 on my watch, so we just have 5 minutes on our time box. Will it be okay if we continue for another 5 minutes or so after our time box?
Yes,
sure, Piyush. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So I'll quickly take you through the last 2 steps on the structure of setting up your retrospectives. And then if there are any additional questions, I will take it after these 2 steps. Okay. So step number 4, deciding what to do. That's your step number 4. What we are doing here is we are trying to identify our actionable improvements. What are the experiments that you would like to try? Are there any specific things that you would like to try out with this? Sorry. Okay. So deciding what we need to do here after we have gathered our insight, after the insights have come for us. My suggestion is, just like your sprint goals or just like any other objectives that you might create, whenever you're trying to figure out your actions or improvements, always make them smart, right? Make them specific, make them measurable, make them relevant, make them achievable, and make them time bound, right? Because when you do that, then only you are going to ensure that those actions will be taken, and you as a team can understand whether the actions that we had planned, are they really helping us to become better. All right. So that's what really helps, making your improvement actionable items even as smart actions, right? Most of you already know about SMART, so that would be really great if you can ensure that the actions that are coming out of your retrospective are also SMART. Now, like I said earlier in the session, my experience where my Scrum Master was facilitating the retrospective, and the team came up with about 25 different items. But which of that should we take? Which of that should be the one we should be implementing, right? So a quick technique that you might be able to use within your teams if you are struggling with this aspect, use dot voting. Okay, and what is dot voting? Typically, what I do here is I give each of my team member about 3 votes. Okay, and I say, okay, this say step 1, step 2, step 3, and step 4 are our 4 improvement items. Okay, then on those improvement items, you can put all the 3 votes that you have to one item, or you can distribute those items or those votes across these different items. And then each of the team member will come and they will start putting some their votes. So maybe someone puts one here, and say one here, right? Someone else comes and starts putting another vote here and another vote here. Another team member comes and they put their votes all of here, right? Another team member comes and they say, no, this makes more sense to me. Another team member comes and they put some votes here and some votes here, and so on and so forth. So what we get is your team is now deciding what makes sense for them. Whichever improvement item gets the most votes becomes your high priority item to be addressed. Okay, so you take that item and you start working on it. Now the challenge is, who is going to work on it? How do we know that, right? And that is where I use another technique, and that is called as what, who, and when. What it means is that once we have identified our actionable improvements, we are clearly setting an accountability with one of our team members, right? Accountability. We are not saying that is the only person who is going to work on it, right? But this person is going to be accountable to ensure that this improvement gets done. Okay, and what are we doing here is we are trying to figure out, okay, what we are going to do, who is going to accountable for it. Maybe it might be one of my team members, or it might be myself as a Scrum Master. And then we are also putting a time limit. We are making it time bound by when this action item would be done, right? Will it be done in, yeah.
Yeah, if it is not related to our team, if it is related to some management, like allocating resources and like that, then how we can approach?
That's a great point, Pranavi. So allocating a person, right? When you mentioning about resource, you're talking about a person, right?
Yeah,
so
person.
Maybe I can share my experience, Piyush.
Yeah, sure, Rajesh, go ahead.
As a Scrum Master, yeah, we had such action items come out of the team, the external dependency. So I, as a Scrum Master, have taken that task on me, and then I used to update the team. And then we, with our internal knowledge, we try to skim out the information, who is the respective point of contact, and then what are the steps we can take at least. What is the minimum acceptable done for us for that action item, which is external dependency. And then I used to communicate with external or leadership to work on that item. And then on a regular basis, used to post back to the team.
Yeah, same thing I also follow, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Rajesh, and I think that's what I have also experienced. This is something, an external dependency, something which is out of my team's control, and it might become an impediment at a future point in time. So, as a Scrum Master, it becomes my responsibility on getting this resolved. So, such things I often keep with myself as a Scrum Master, dealing with the organizational level challenges or the dependencies that are on other teams. Does that help?
And one tip I experienced personally myself. If we also mention this dependency in sprint reviews where all the stakeholders are, make them visible, all the impairments, I think that could also benefit on a team's perspective. Yeah.
Absolutely. Great. All right. Thank you for that, Rajesh. Quickly taking on to the last step of your great structure of retrospectives, and that is closing, right? Everyone wants a closure, right? So closing your retrospective is a important activity. A lot of times we do not focus on it because we say, okay, we are anyways a team, we know everything well. But then what I have found is if you make closing a repetitive activity in your retrospective, right? And in this closing activity, one thing that you do, and that is appreciate your team members, that creates a lot of impact. Okay. How I typically do my closing activities is just remind people once more about the prime directive. And then I often, and when we were doing our physical, we were working from the same offices and all, there I used to carry kudo cards. Okay. And I used to hand over these kudo cards to my team members and say, okay, at the end, let's take a moment to think about how everyone has helped each other, and is there someone whom you would like to acknowledge for their efforts during the last sprint, right? Whether they helped you directly or their work impacted your work and somehow, right? Just write a brief note of thank you to them and hand over the cards. And that's how I used to do. Today in remote sessions, what I typically do is I create the idea board. I use idea boards, right? Using idea boards, I create some stickies and I ask them that these are your kudo cards. Write in on these stickies and share it across with your team members, right? One single note of appreciation brings much more engagement, more than any other reward or recognition that your organization can give to your team members, right? So ensure that that is there in your retrospectives. Another aspect that I typically use in closing is to get a feedback about the retrospective itself. Okay, folks, we all were here, we did some things. Was this really meaningful? Do we think that this has helped us to improve than what we were doing earlier, right? Having that kind of retrospective helps you as a Scrum Master or an Agile coach who is facilitating the event to take that feedback and try to improve it for your next retrospective or for another team, right? One quick thing that I typically use is using a fist of five, right? If anyone is coming from the safe context here, they might already know what fist of five is. It's a simple voting technique where you ask your team members to show your hands and on a show me a fist of five, right? So when I say 1, 2, 3, how did it go for you? 1 meaning that it is what was completely boring. 0 means, oh, I will never come again to your retrospective. 5 meaning, oh, it was awesome and I really liked it, right? I was really benefited by your retrospective. So I simply do this quick fist of 5 and then we close the retrospective. So typically with that, whatever knowledge that I was having about retrospectives, how to run retrospectives, it's right here on front of you, right? Step 1, set the context. Step 2, gather the data. Step 3, generate your insights. Step 4, decide what to do, create proper accountabilities, right? Don't leave your retrospective without creating those accountabilities, else no one is going to get the things done. And finally, close it with an appreciation note and a quick feedback on our teams, right? I'm seeing a message from Pavas saying that they use vote in the teams section. Wow, that's a MS Teams section, right? That's great. So you can use many different techniques just to figure out, was the retrospective itself helpful for your team members? All right, that's all from my side, folks.
This is Prem here.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. One question, maybe.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So I hear one question. So basically, you talked about I to capture the information, but is there any kind of what do you say, place where we get to know what are the different online tools which are available and a sample of how that can be done? because idea boards have become very boring for the team where I'm running. So they're always expecting a new tool or online version of it.
Yeah.
Last year full, they were kind of getting different templates. Now they're over with that. Now they wanted different tools.
Yeah. So
and it has become very boring. So how to? Yeah.
So I'm not really sure about if there is a list out there which talks about all the different tools, but then what I typically find or what I have really found helpful is using something as Mural. Okay. And why? Because Mural gives you a blank space to decide how you want to play, right? So if I have to show you my Mural here right now, this is all empty space. Okay. And I can do whatever with this empty space. Just I was able to do in a physical space if I was in a physical place, right? It allows me to create many different kinds of frameworks. It allows me to use different icons. It allows me to use different text boxes and even stickies and everything. So I have found Mural quite a great tool, right? And you can create any kind of retrospective that you want here on your Mural board. For example, if I have to say simply run a sailboat retrospective here, what I can do is I can find a image of sailboat, right? And I can simply bring that sailboat up here, and typically I will let me show you that how I can do that. Okay. All right. So what I can do is I can simply come here, okay, in this empty space, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring in an image of sailboat here, right? And here is my sailboat. And I can run my retrospective right here on this single Mural board. If you want to use it, go ahead, do it. That's how it is. Rajesh is saying Miro is also available, and there is something similar in MS Teams, which is called as MS Whiteboard. Subhash has mentioned that. So yes, there are a couple of other tools which can be handy. Satyajit also mentioning about Kahoot games. Yeah.
Yep, I also feel if we can select a metaphor for the teams, right?
Yeah.
What my team thinks, and decide our retrospectives based on that. That creates a different culture of the team as well.
Absolutely.
Right. And one of the events, probably you must have talked about it. So one of the things typically I do with the team is try to see if we can do some sort of a check-in with the team. Whether we have the right mindset and whether we have, the step which you said in the closing. Mm-hmm. I do it in the starting just to see whether team is in the right mood, for this particular event, because it requires a lot of, prep work as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great thing actually. Doing a checking at the start when we are setting the context also helps, right, to create the right set of mindset as we enter into our retrospectives.
Yeah, Piyush, we do icebreaker sessions, like quick 5-minute icebreaker sessions. Yeah.
Nice. All right. So folks, that's all I had from my side. We are 10 minutes over our time box. So are there any questions? I'm open to take that up. Folks who would like to drop off can drop off. I'm still here for another few minutes. Let me know.
Thanks, Piyush, for this nice session. I just have one question here. Like, you always have a mix in the team where some people are always ready to speak out what they think, how other things happen, but there is always a set of people who are not really willing to speak. So that's a challenge I always face. And do you have any thoughts around how we can resolve that kind of issue?
Sure. So
if you have any experience on this.
Yeah, Toshi. So if you remember, I talked about liberating structures earlier, right? So
yes.
Right? if you visit the Liberating Structures website, you will see some microstructures, and the entire idea of these microstructures is to involve everyone. Even if people don't speak, you put them into a position where they will have to come up with something. For example, when I talked about the 1 to 4 all technique, you are asking team members to think to themselves for first minute to identify challenges or to identify any actions that they would like to take, right? So they are thinking to themselves, and then you are pairing them with someone else. Okay. So if you already know that some person is an introvert or does not speak too much, then ensure that that person speaks first when they are talking into a pair, or when they are talking into a group of 4 or something like that, right? So that would bring them up on board and help them to speak more.
Sure, I'll definitely going to try this approach
Sure.
in my upcoming retros.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Good. Any other questions? Anything else, folks? All right. So if there are no questions, can I quickly ask you to give me a quick feedback? Was this session helpful? Was this not good? Right? Maybe you can just give me a fist of 5, either by opening your cameras or using a reaction on your Zoom screens. Right? That should be fine for me. Whatever works for you, folks. Thank you. I see a few of thumbs up. Even if it was not helpful, you already knew everything about it. Give me a thumbs down. That's also acceptable. I would like to know how I can improve it for the next time. Great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time. Thanks for joining me. Have a nice evening, and we'll connect soon in our next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.